talk about community voice. It's informing the student experience. We're also going to talk about the interior experience. We've been focused on taking a look at the concept of the building. So now we're really going to get into the building and just talk about the interior experience and the activities. We get some share back there. And then there's going to be a quick update at the end. We will do, in that interior experience, we will do an engagement activity with the whole group, and then we'll come back to an update with Marshall High School to talk a little bit about that. As we transition and think about the move there, we'll do a quick update on where we are with the fields. We talked a bit about it last time, so we'll just give an update on where we are there. And then we'll do some reminders and a closeout of next steps. So with that, again, this is our team. There are a number of us here. Folks, raise your hands. So we all know who our design team is. We're working a whole host of other folks that you will continue to see. Last time we had in landscape, and you'll continue to see some of these other folks as well as we meet. So in terms of schedule, we are right at that completion of what we call schematic design. So that's really thinking about the concept of the building. So although sometimes when we review plans and look at things, we're like, oh, that looks so set in stone. Nothing is set in stone, but the concept is there. And we really want to think about all of the input that we're hearing from users so that we can really start to massage the building as we move into design development to make sure that we're getting the adjacencies and the spaces right for everyone. There's a whole host of other information here, just talking about when we are intending to move in, which is an open of fall 2028 as the current target. And that timeline, of course, is dependent on the bond funding. So with that, Amanda's going to recap us from DAG 4 and the community workshop.
I'm going to sit over here because this is being recorded. So just to let you know, it is now being recorded. And Lisa is right behind you, just so you know.
Oh!
We had a school board member that couldn't make it, so we're recording here next week. Just so you know. So for DAG 4, just back in September, we got some really great feedback from you all, and so we wanted to just do a brief recap of what we heard. We did record every comment. We have a very extensive list of those, and we categorize them and look at that as data in a really deep way. And we also kind of zoom out and say, like, okay, what were some of the big picture comments that we heard? When we talked about the exterior development in particular, what we heard was an overall support for the conceptual approach we were discussing of a geode where the exterior of the campus on the main site is really feeling like it's addressing the city and addressing sort of a more rugged, textured, orderly shell, and then a little bit more excitement happening on the interior. We in particular heard a lot of support for brick as an exterior material, and spaces that feel warm, natural, and lived in. We did hear concern about concrete, like people have various opinions about it, some of them negative. And so we heard that, and we heard kind of within that as a context around just being any concern about materials that might come off as feeling sort of cold, heavy, or ugly. So I think the design team shares that sentiment. So we're really thinking about that carefully as we move forward with next steps on exterior design. We did hear some support for the use of color and glass in the courtyard to create a special experience inside of there, but we did hear sort of like some warning or hesitance about it being too colorful or too juvenile feeling, too young. And so that's something that we'll continue to want to kind of balance and say, if we use color on the interior, it might be like a subtle fashion, and or kind of have that color from the interior kind of come out and be visible from the exterior. We really heard clearly a desire for the building to look like a school and identify Cleveland High School to the larger neighborhood. So this question about what a school looks like, will be a great one for us early December. We'll talk about that a little bit more explicitly with some more specific imagery for you of the design development of the exterior. So we also had a public workshop, and we got some great feedback. A lot of the similar material that came to the DAG last time went to the public workshop. Some of you were there, both. It was the first time that the public had seen the physical model of the project and some of the development. So it's been much longer since last spring, since there was a public workshop. So there was a lot more catching people up at that workshop. But we heard some great feedback about really positive reception of the overall development that you all helped us get to on the building, orientation of the site, the courtyard, how the buildings were arranged, and real just excitement about what this could be like for students and staff. We also heard some really good feedback from alumni, from general community members about the landscape, both within the courtyard and around the edges of the building, how they would really like it to feel. Let's see, we also heard a little bit more about some of the existing building and how we could bring forward the memory of the existing building. Start getting some feedback on that as well, which was interesting. What was that? Oh, thank you. Because we don't have that in here. Yeah, okay. We also went through some of the softball options that we had gone through with the DAG in terms of different ways to handle it, and we're still in a position where there's not a decision on that yet, but we're still working really closely with PBS to provide information about what's possible, and PBS is in ongoing discussions with public parks on that. Parks and Rec. At this DAG in particular, it happened to be a day where there was an event where folks were getting together to talk about the softball needs and baseball needs in Powell Park. And so they were able, a lot of those folks were able to come into the public workshop and be part of that conversation, both before the workshop started and during it, which was really helpful. So we were able to kind of maybe bring together some streams of communication around that topic in the workshop, which is great. Yeah. And then we heard from the committee in public workshop, and we can to read here.
Hello, I'm Rhonda from After Groups. I use pronouns like she and her. Thanks for letting me use my phone for some notes. If you have any questions about what I'm saying, if I talk too fast, just let me know and I can slow it down. Okay, so you have likely seen this graphic before. It's a big timeline of where we're at. We are this today lovely line, and the next time that we're going to be able to gather, we'll be moving into the design development portion. And here's a bit of what we've heard so far in our listening sessions. We have had the SAGA, or sexuality and gender aligned students. There are about 7 that showed up, I want to say. And then we had a big listening session, which is a facilitated conversation with the affinity groups that are listed here. And for that, we had, I think, about 30 students come up, maybe a couple more. So it was a really lively session, a lot of good questions and information came from it. Some of what we heard was that almost every time we asked students, what makes you feel welcomed at this school? What makes you feel good and like you belong here? Almost always the answer is a trusted adult, someone that they go to that makes them feel special, makes them feel listened to, makes them feel heard. So we just want to emphasize that safe spaces for students is that safe space associated with the adults that they trust and are able to work well with. Space size and the balance, that came up. If it's a really wide open space, you're going to get echoes, you're going to get overstimulating. If it's a really small space, then you're going to be cramped or easily distracted. So the design team will be able to work with that and understand that there is a balance that needs to be struck. We also spoke a lot about privacy, especially in restrooms or changing rooms, toilet rooms. And there was a call, especially from our queer students, for more gender-neutral changing areas. One student in particular was noting that they really prefer to have privacy when they are changing at school. And they said, do non-queer students just love changing in front of everyone else? Like, I don't know, high school students that aren't super secure. So, It's interesting that we're getting, a lot of good feedback, and there was lively discussion from that. And then last point I'll touch on is navigational aids throughout the school. Right now, students have called out that there's a lot of pieces of paper just taped up that say the room numbers or where to go, and it's just hard for their families or freshmen or incoming students to know where to go easily. And then I'll also note that, we're also constantly learning as facilitators. We need to adjust our methods in order to better serve our community. So students do have a voice, and there are seen and unseen barriers that make it hard or easy for certain voices to be heard. So we are continuing to increase our participation opportunities and accessibility, such as making online forms, so if you aren't there, you're able to fill it out, or if you don't feel comfortable raising your hand and talking about changing in the restroom in school, you know what, we still want to hear that perspective. You can provide your information anonymously or just online. Any questions? Otherwise, I'll pass it over.
Thanks, Anna. So in addition to the student groups that Rhonda just went through, we have also been meeting with a whole lot of groups that are based in the school, either at PBS or within the school itself. So we've talked to transportation, athletics, the instructional leadership team within the school, wraparound services. At the last staff meeting, we met with many of you who are staff and did breakout groups and got a lot of initial information from you and feedback on some of the specific spaces that you teach in or work in. We also had a SPED session and are having another one shortly. Met with the facilities and grounds group on site. We've been talking through wood shop or construction space, talking to the county health department as well as nutrition services. So this is only some of the people we are talking to. We will be looping back to many of these groups, especially the school-based, teacher-based, and administration-based groups in December, January. As we have floor plans to show you, really get into the detail of making sure all the adjacencies and the storage things are correct. What we would like to talk about today is how does design help shape the interior experience of being in a school, whether you are teaching or learning or facilitating or counseling or whatever it is you do in a school if you're a parent visiting it. So the way we would like to do this is talk a little bit about what we have heard from after Bruce's conversations, and then what is that is translating into actual design examples for us. So we've given you previews and snippets of this before, but this will be a slightly more comprehensive discussion. Still kind of the beginning of that design process. There will be an opportunity, there are boards in the back, so if you have specific comments you want to make on these slides, you're welcome to. And we are also really just still shaping this. So if there's words or ideas or themes that you just feel aren't quite right yet, or something is missing, great, let us know. That's okay. Where is there? So this slide is sort of a visual framework that I think helps us understand a little bit more about what our hopes are. So on the left, you see the current school, current framework with a little diagram. It's very much this internally organized building. Once you're in one of those hallways, you have no clue what's going on anywhere else in the building, right? You can't really see through the building. You can't see around the corners. You don't know. There could be an amazing basketball game going on. You're not going to hear it, see it, whatever, unless you're in basketball and the gym. So we think of it as a bit on the generic and restrictive side. Just the building itself. I mean, it's a 100-year-old building. It could have been located anywhere in the world. Robin shared last time some of its features. It was a fairly prototypical design that probably did end up in other places. And what has happened is your amazing staff and teachers have been adapting learning around the building. So they are making do with what they have. They're finding places to provide services to reach students to really create a nurturing environment, which is great for the students here. And we know we can do better. We know architecture can make a better supportive space. So our future framework, our idea is really this, as Luke presented last meeting, this idea of this geo that's opening up and creating this really lively interior experience that is very exciting. It's physically interior, but also the courtyard space. We think of that the interior zone of the block. And it's dynamic and empowering. The building is elevating the learning experience. So instead of making do and working around the building, we're trying to help make sure the building is actually contributing to that learning experience. So I'll share the 6 frameworks we've come up with for our aspirations. Each one is embedded in ideas that have come to us through the conversations that we've been having, especially with After Bruce, especially focused on school populations that are further from the mainstream. And that's really important to us because lots of kids thrive in make-do spaces, but not everybody does. And listening to folks who have had a harder time, who've had more troubles, locating privacy, finding the space they need, finding the services they need, those are the students and the teachers and the voices that we really want to make sure we're centering. So we design for them and uplifts the experience for everybody and make sure we have a really amazing building that is serving a whole variety of needs. So like I said, we'll walk through, Hannah and I are going to tag team these, walk through, each slide is organized this way where we identify an issue at the top, our aspiration, our spatial aspiration, what we hope can happen, and then what our design strategy is. And then the images on the right are meant to evoke some of those qualities. They're still emerging, still in schematic design. They're starting to set that stage. So the first is that the current experience feels institutional, this current building, which does not feel safe and welcoming for everybody. And so our aspiration is that the new school will create an inviting atmosphere that is easy to navigate and is balanced with safety features. So what does that look like? It is welcoming. It invites personalization. You can make your mark, show what matters to you inside the building. It is both active and supervisable. It's important for everybody who works in a high school to kind of know what's going on in that high school. There's appropriate visibility and transparency into learning and working spaces and the opportunity to secure those spaces if needed in some kind of safety emergency. So some of the types of spaces we're imagining, we've been talking a lot about the warmth and the wood and natural lighting. Again, different ways to think of visibility in and across the building, across the courtyard. Even the image on the right, looking at how we get around corners. Right now, this building has so many right angle corners, and I'm sure every one of you has run into somebody coming around a corner inside the school. So how do we get around that in our design? So we'll continue to develop that. The image or the little flag on the bottom of each of these is showing how we're continuing to develop them. So through design iteration, the space, and conversations with the district.
Why don't you know what, I'm gonna go over here. You keep driving.
Okay.
All right, so the next issue that we're responding to is that the current school creates a stressful environment that we know impacts the culture, right? You've heard us bring this theme to you before, but really what we're looking to do is support pause and rest so students can thrive throughout the school. Right now, the current condition is it's very binary. You're either in the classroom or in the corridor or outside the school. And what we're looking to do is bring in moments of pause throughout the building. So that looks like hallway benches, adjustable lighting, right? Some indirect lighting, varied acoustics to support a variety of environments from noisy to quiet, views from nature throughout the building, whether that's kind of continuously in the corridor or kind of framing views and supporting the moment of pause there, and looking kind of connected to that theme, looking at biophilic design and how we might bring that into the overall building.
Right. So the next issue we have heard is that there are limited permanent or consistent spaces for students, particularly affinity groups and student groups to meet in the building. There is one conference room, right? And it is triangular. And it is also the alumni room. So it is not the best place for anybody to meet, much less meet the variety of needs that you have amongst your students and your faculty and all the different supports that come into the building. So our aspiration is to dedicate student-centered spaces to anchor marginalized communities and foster a sense of belonging. So we do that by offering a variety of spaces, so different levels of enclosure, spaces that feel, like Rhonda was saying, smaller, more enclosed, warmer, spaces that are bigger and brighter and open, easier just to join in. And you don't necessarily need an invitation because you see what's there and you can take part. And allow groups, student groups especially, to figure out where it is in that spectrum they want to hold their meetings and not just the one option that they have. Also that these spaces are both distributed around the building and there's some that are really centralized, probably near the common spaces, so easier to to also easy to supervise. But there's dedicated storage. What we were hearing from, especially affinity groups and clubs, is we have stuff, and where do we put it? And how do we know it's always there? And how can we count on it year to year to year to be where we need it to be? Variety in the materials and the colors, so that there is again choice. Not every conference room needs to be the plain, same vanilla white space. There can be some variety, and groups can choose which one makes the most sense for them. As well as areas for display and personalization, which we'll touch on in another one of these.
Okay, we've heard that the current building does not support the needs of many school communities, and I add many underrepresented school communities. So the goal is really to provide options and resources to uplift and support all students without stigma or isolation associated with them. We're looking to do that through creating inclusive, comfortable, and safe spaces. And we are looking at doing that throughout the building by providing services that are easy to locate, that they're not hidden, that it's not sort of an othering to access them. And looking at providing non-gendered toilet and changing spaces, so building off of what Rhonda mentioned that we've heard from our listening sessions and throughout our feedback process. And some examples of how to do that you'll see on each of these slides. We're looking at sort of real life examples of how we go about providing these types of spaces.
Yeah, this is one that we'll definitely be developing, especially as we think about things like the counseling center or wraparound services, what it feels like to walk up to those spaces, how you know where they are, how they don't necessarily feel odd to go to, making sure they're in a place that feels really easy to access. And signage and things like that will layer in and help create that easy. So this is an interesting one, and the issue is that the work to shift perspectives and different ways of thinking has often fallen directly to the groups that are on the margins, so expecting other groups to explain their culture, explain what their practices are, that kind of thing. And so what our question, our provocation is, can we encourage all students to explore different cultures and share what they are learning, especially as part of this International Baccalaureate curriculum? How can the school become an active part in that dialogue and that two-way conversation? So we're not there every day. We can't, actually get people to share, but we can, in terms of architecture, start to set up what we're calling windows, whether they're real or virtual, to share culture, to share learning, to share knowledge. So that might be displays that students curate, kitchen table type spaces, so comfortable spaces that it's easy for a group to lay out what they're doing with their club or what they're doing with their project, invite others to come in and take a look. Permanent types of display that you see, like that mural on the upper right. Also changeable display areas, like whether it's little places to put up flyers or papers, or those corner displays, where this is literally a window into a classroom that has a bunch of storage on it that allows that classroom to start to display what they're doing. So as you walk by, you're seeing and engaging into that room. And both permanent things within the building, which Marika will touch on at the very end here, as well as frameworks for adding new items. Knowing that the day we move in is not the only day that we have in the building, that we will have hopefully another 100 years of students adding and layering in with their learning, that experience.
Okay, we've heard that Native students and community members feel invisible, and so our work here is really to acknowledge the Native American origins of the land and the current presence of Native peoples. And as we do that, we're looking at potential places for kind of acknowledging and recognizing the Native community at the school. Some potential strategies for doing that are reflecting kind of important spatial organizations like the center of the site or the entry on the east, orienting to the sun's path, expressing natural materials and using native plants in the courtyard, and displaying cultural symbols. I think this is one too where we're striking a balance between not wanting to arrive at any conversation with the solution, but really looking to kind of co-create what that conversation is. So we have our first Native student listening session this week on Thursday. Nikki, thank you for helping kind of shape what that conversation looks like. And then we'll have a workshop at some later date, likely in November, to kind of broaden the conversation as well. So these are some examples of questions that we'll bring to that meeting on Thursday.
So those are the 6 design frameworks that we have been developing and are coaching the interior experiences around. Like I said, we do have all 6 of them up on the boards in the back, so as you take a break and walk around and stretch your legs, feel free, if something caught your eye or your ear, feel free to add comments there. We really appreciate it. I'm going to turn it over to Mariko to explain a little bit about how all this comes into the whole building, and then we're going to break out into an activity. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you heard a lot about the design aspirations and some of the strategies that we're starting to think through the building. Our new building is going to be 4 levels and a mass timber, so we're looking ways to how we can celebrate the mass timber building and thinking about how that experience, the student experience, is going to translate as you travel both vertically up to the building, up to the different floors, and then also horizontally, like what is the experience traveling down the hallways? What is the experience coming into the front door? We shared about scale and how important it is being able to support different types of students and also of all abilities. So not only when we're thinking about both the horizontal and vertical experience, but how is everyone going to travel there and how can we make that experience as equal to each other so that a person can travel down the hallway with all of their friends and get there in the same reasonable amount of time. Experience the spectrum of spaces that we also want it to feel easy to navigate that I touched on, but also the identity and placemaking. So we're looking at spaces to have what we're calling destinations and creating these destination points of travel. So like what we talked about earlier in our design strategies is about what can we have display, what can we have places to sit and gather both formally and informally and have it in various different sizes. So I can meet with my best friend, there's just 2 of us, or I can be out in a big group where there's 10 of us and go out and celebrate. We also talked about moments of pause. We're looking to bring in some of the sketches there, places where we can be cozy and gather, little alcoves and built-in benches, thinking about as we're traveling down the hallways, going to our lockers and having a place where we can sit down. We can go to the next slide. We're also thinking about all different types of spectrums. So looking at hypersensitivity and hyposensitivities and everything in between. On the hypersensitivity, warm, neutral tones, celebrating that mass timber that we're talking about, order and repetition. It feels very orderly and calm and welcoming to those. But then we also hear from many others that we want lots of color in our building. We want to be able to celebrate our culture. We want to paint murals. We love patterns and textures. And then finding that middle ground of it where we can bring in maybe a select bold color, maybe it's an accent wall, maybe it's a place to bring in where the art can come in and create a mural for those spaces. And then the next one. And then as we talked about both the horizontal and vertical experience, what is the experience and the materials that we use to navigate those buildings? We talked about maybe starting to peel away some of the hard corners that we can't see and connect with each other. But if we start to look at some of the design language, maybe bringing in more glassy, starting to what we're kind of calling eroding the corners, softening those corners, those niches. We have beautiful courtyards that we're going to want to have that natural light connect to. The bottom right image there is where we can really start to connect to the outdoors and then the beautiful courtyards.
Actually, not going to do the updates right now, do the activities. So I know that was a lot, but we're going to actually transition to activities. So our teammates are going to set up 8 spots. And what we're going to do is actually invite you to sit down. We're going to break you guys into groups of like 3 people. And you'll have a design team member with you. We're going to actually go through 2 sets of activities. One is a day in the life. We're going to have you imagine what it's like to be in this building, either as a student or a teacher. Imagine going through the building, different spaces, we'll be listening, hearing what you say. If you're like, oh, I got lost, or oh, it's a long way, or, whatever those comments are, we're gonna take those down, mark them up. And then we're gonna actually layer in a second activity where we bring in a scenario that After Bruce helped develop, and it's based on a student or a type of student at Cleveland right now, and some of the things that they experience that may be different from your own personal experiences, and help layer that into your thoughts of how you might experience the building. So, it's gonna take us just a second to set up, but our goal would be to distribute staff and students. So if you are a staff member or a student,